All right, get an audio check and a video check, please. You should be able to see me and you should be able to hear me, and you should see a satellite picture at the moment with my little face up in the top right-hand corner. So if you can pop that in the comments for me, that would be much appreciated. But anyway, I shall continue. So if you're looking at sites where the solution is so simple and so straightforward, the likelihood is you're going to find yourself competing on price. And I'll just give you the example. The stock standard 1 to 2 subdivision, if it's an 810 square meter block, which in Queensland and other areas is a very standard size blocks, and it can be split down the middle, it's 20 meter frontage, 40 meters deep roughly. If that's what you're looking at, then pretty much everyone is probably going to be looking at it and looking at doing the exact same thing. So then it just turns into a price war. Now, it's not to say that you can't buy those. It's absolutely not. I'm not saying that at all. But what I am saying is that if you are finding sites where creativity and your expertise can give you a point of difference, then that is a very good thing. And that is a very strong advantage. And this is a good example of this. And what excited me about this when I saw this is I actually did a development about 7 years ago, 2 blocks away from this, in almost the exact same situation. And so immediately what I saw as possible on this block, I would suggest is probably different to at least 90 to 95% of other people that will look at this property. So that's what I'm going to take you through today. Now, as usual, I'm going to start throwing more questions to you guys. I want to start seeing that involvement, and I want to start seeing you taking the teachings from the previous weeks and bringing them into this week and seeing how you can actually put that into action. Because ultimately, if you're just watching me, thank you, appreciate it. If you're just watching me, then this is entertainment. If you're interacting, this is learning, and this is you educating yourself, and this is you going further on your journey. So take that as a hint, guys. The more you interact, the more you're going to get out of this. And the more you interact, the more attention I'm going to give you. So when I throw a question to you, please answer it. Even if you think you might be wrong, just give it a go. Give it your best shot. And here we go. Okay, so for this one here, we are looking at a property that is 637 square meters in size. It's got a house smack bang in the middle of it. It's got a pool. It's on a corner. It's in next generation zoning. So for those that aren't familiar with this particular council and what that means, that is their sort of low to medium density residential. So you can do townhouses, you can do duplexes, you can do small lot land subdivisions. It's quite a flexible plan. So let's see in the comments, what do you see as possible on this property straight up? What would be your best guess as to what would be the best and highest use for this property? So it could be any of the things that I've just mentioned. It could be something else. And I'm just going to give you a street view of the property as well. So let's have a look at what that looks like. All right, so this is the property we're looking at here. I'll just make it a bit bigger as well, just so you get that. That's not it. That's it there. Okay, so we've got a high set property, 3-bed, 1 bath from memory. There's a pool sitting right here. And then I'll get rid of that so you can see the satellite. Okay, so I've got one suggestion there saying 1 into 3 and demolition. So demolish the house and cut into 3. Look, theoretically that is possible based on the planning scheme at I guess at a simple desktop view. Initial, yep, that would be roughly 200, just over 200 square meter blocks. And let's have a look. What's that? Retain house and sell land. Which land, Gary? Just be a bit more specific for me. What land are we selling? Okay, so what you're suggesting there, we've got roughly 32 meters in full width. So on Roland's suggestion there, we'd be having roughly 10 meter wide blocks, and that'd be a bit over 200 square meters each. Now, for some people, they may think that is absolutely insane, but doing 200 square meter blocks these days is becoming almost standard. Effectively, they get to build their own townhouse, and a big one at that. So Gary has said retain house and sell the land. Now, I'm going to guess you're suggesting maybe this vacant land next to the house, Gary. Rachel, can you do townhouses in this zone? Yes, you can. So I think Gary is suggesting keep the house and then sell this land on the side here would be my guess. Yep, perfect. Okay. All right, so we've had demolish and 1 into 3. We've had keep the house and create a block of land on the side here. And we'll take Rachel's as a suggestion of doing townhouses. So doing townhouse development here would be effectively demolishing and then easily 3 townhouses, maybe a 4th, depending. Yep, yeah, maybe a 4th, just depends. Yep, cool. All right. So I'm going to throw an additional option at you. Sorry, I'm just going to put my phone on do not disturb. Should really learn to do that earlier. Okay, so here's an additional option, and I'm going to give away the option by doing this. This is a development of mine from 2018. So this was the existing house here. That was actually the original house for, I think it was a 400-acre milk farm in this spot here. And just to show you, I'm kind of laying on thick the area expertise here as well. This is also a previous development of mine. Notice a pattern here. So this one here, now to be fair, it was a larger block, but nobody was looking at this property here thinking, oh, we'll keep that house and we'll cut off a block either side. Now, this was actually when this zoning was quite new and not many people really knew what to do with the higher density zoning in this area. But so they had a pool here. We filled in the pool, and this was actually the original entrance coming in here. There was a pathway that came up to what used to be the front stairs here. So we removed that as the front access, little deck out the back there, and we made the new access over here. Did a basic cosmetic renovation on the property, created a carport for them here, and then cut off a block of land here, block of land here. So immediately when I saw this property pop up, the question, of course, for me straight away was, cool, can I copy and paste? Can I do the exact same thing again? So let's have a look. Now, notably, it is a smaller block. All right, what challenges can you see here that you think may cause an issue for that? I've also got, could do DA for 1 to 3 townhouses and flip 2. Yeah, possibly. Can you get 4? Maybe. Buy next door. Rachel, you've been looking at the emails. Which neighbor, Rachel? Which neighbor? So I'll let Rachel come back with that one. But guys, what are the challenges you would think we might have here with splitting this into 3? Just think logically. You don't necessarily need to be a planning scheme expert and be able to articulate exactly what it is. But just if you were just problem solving and looking at this kind of going, oh, what could be a challenge here? That's where we start. Small lot on the pool side. Yeah, you're starting to see the picture from that other one. Yep. Crossover. Gary's onto something. Why would there be an issue, or why could there be an issue with the crossover, Gary? Rachel, cut off the deck, fill in the pool, new crossover on the main-ish road. I think that's what you're suggesting is potentially the issue. And as the Leeches Road seems to be busy. All right, good. All right, so let's go through those things there. All right, so number 1, can you fill in a pool? Yes, you can. You can fill in the pool, and I haven't done one for a little while. The last time I did it, it was, I think, 10 to 15 grand, because you do need a level 1 compaction certificate if you are expecting someone to be able to build on it, which obviously here in such a small block, they do need to be able to build really across the whole thing. So yes, theoretically, we could cut off the deck here. Now, interestingly, I'm actually going to put a few comments in here too. We've been creating some reels out of some of this, and it's been very interesting what people get caught up on, where most of the comments come. And this is not surprising though, because most people tend to think that the success and development comes from being a functional expert, as in like really knowing your engineering, really knowing how water works and how sewer works. And it's just not the case. That's not how you put deals together. That is important, but you've got engineers for that. You've got town planners for that. That's not what makes a successful developer. So you'll notice with some of these things, a lot of these things, that I'm just giving you a guide. I'm going, okay, here I think there could be a challenge. Here I see this could work. But I'm never going to go buy a property based on that. I'm always going to take that information and go and check it out with my consultants, because it doesn't matter how long you do this as a developer. You're never going to be an engineer unless you go become an engineer. You're never going to be a town planner unless you go become a town planner and do the study. But there's no need for that. So it's been interesting watching the comments and people arguing over bits and pieces that I say about the technicalities of the water and the sewer, which just are not that relevant when you're doing this due diligence at this stage. So on this one here, fill in the pool. Yep, level 1 compaction certificate would be needed. Now, I think it was Gary mentioned potential issue with Leeches Road South being this one here, giving access. So it's not a busy road, but it's a decent thoroughfare. And yes, it is definitely a worthy concern. Would they allow us to have an additional crossover here? Now, there's plenty of houses with crossovers on Leeches Road South, but they were developed 30, 40 years ago. So it doesn't mean that you would be allowed now. That being said, on my previous development up here in 2018, they did allow us to do that. Now, I do remember there being a bit of back and forth with it, but in the end, we were able to demonstrate that that was the better outcome. Because one of the challenges you would have on doing it on the side here is if we do a measurement here, we're getting real technical here. Again, you don't need to be an expert on this stuff when you're getting started. So if I go 10 meters roughly to about there. Now, it doesn't have to be 10 meters, but let's just say it's 10 meters. All right, so that's roughly where my boundary would be. Well, don't quote me on this, but I think from memory, so there is a rule with how far you need to be from the tangent point, which is basically this point here where the corner stops. Well, actually, it's out here on the gutter. And I think from memory, it's 6 meters, but don't quote me. So let's say that's the tangent point there. If it was 6 meters, that would mean the driveway would have to start there, which interestingly is pretty much where that existing driveway does start. So I'm probably not far off there. Could be less than that. As I said, don't quote me. But that would create an issue for this property here if they would not allow access on Leeches Road South. So that is a risk. That is something we need to talk to a traffic engineer about and also just engage with council and see what their appetite is for that. They did allow it in, Rachel, yep, 6 meters, thank you. They did allow for that in my previous development. Does not mean that they have to let me in this one. So that's a flag. It's not necessarily an issue just yet, but it's a flag, something that needs further investigation. Okay, what else? I'm going to give you a hint here in the way I draw this up. Now, if we were to say that the boundary was, what I'll do is I will put it on this way. Now, today I will give you a heads up. We may not actually get to the feasibility component because I want to really focus in on what we're doing here. But this is where the magic is today. All right, so roughly that's 180. I mean, if you really wanted to, you could get it to 200. And then the other block would be about here. In this zoning, you can do build to boundary walls or boundaries. So roughly like that. And obviously demolishing this deck here, it would be a requirement. Okay, what other challenges could we have? I'll give you a hint. Boom, Rachel, man, you're on fire. Rachel, fire rating and side boundaries on the money. Perfect. Yes, because we would be talking built to boundary walls. Now that's easy to deal with the new houses that get built. What about the existing one? Because the magic here is, can we keep this house? Because if everyone else is looking at this thinking, house has got to go, or it just can't be, it can't be done because of the existing house. It's going to be too expensive to get rid of, too much value, et cetera, et cetera. But what if we can figure out how to keep it? That's often where the magic is. So theoretically, with the plan here, we can keep it and do one either side if we can solve that access that we've already talked about. But yes, fire, that could be interesting because let's have a look. Number one, I mean, from what I've shown you already, you can see that it's a timber house. That's not a solid start for fire ratings. Okay, let's have a look. We can't really see much here, but obviously given that there's a deck, you know for sure that there's a door there. There's probably windows there because the deck is an add-on. So that was previously the external wall. It's timber, windows, door, which we'd be filling in the door to get rid of the deck, probably. Oops. I think my screen share should still be there. Okay, let's have a look at this end of the house. Okay, so again, we've got timber and we've got 2 windows. Now, and I don't even know what the eave is made out of, but that already is a challenge. And that could be the undoing of that idea. So previous ones I've done have been brick houses, or the timber component of the house was far enough away that it wasn't an issue. Whereas here we are talking about getting that boundary right up against it. Now, one of the options which could be possible, so basically, let me take it back a step. If we were to put the boundary right up against here and do a zero boundary, this end of the house would need to be fire rated, and so would the other end. Now, I'm not even sure exactly how we would achieve that given the situation, because it depends on how far back it goes. It's been a while since I had to deal with it. It may not even just be that wall. It might be somewhere around the corner as well, depending how far back from the boundary you've got to go. I cannot remember those specifics. But all I know now is, okay, I need to speak to a building certifier to find out what is required to make this fire safe. And I already know that's not going to be that straightforward. When it was a brick house, it was relatively simple. I needed to change the materials on the eave and I needed to brick in the windows. That was the solution. And it was doable with that particular house. With this one here, I've got a big question mark on how that would be done in a cost-effective way and also an aesthetic way, because the house has to look all right afterwards. So, yeah, that throws a big curveball, the fire rating side. How could we solve that without doing anything to the house? How could we solve the fire rating issue without doing anything to the house? And I will tell you that this one here, we're pushing the boundaries on a lot of stuff here. There's plenty of places in some of the things we're going to go through today where eventually, when we're going through it with our consultants and our experts, that they may pull it apart. There may be an undoing, but this is where you get your creative juices flowing, and you look for opportunities. You look for what if. All right, no suggestions for how we can solve it without touching the house? Well, one option, theoretically, is we just pull the boundary back. So currently, we've worked on that magical number of 10 meters. All right, well, what if we shifted it a meter away from the house? Now, we're getting to some very interesting size blocks here. As I said, we're really pushing the boundaries here. But technically, there's actually nothing in the scheme saying you can't do this. You need to demonstrate that you can actually build something functional here, or actually go through with the build. And the same on this side here. Now, we're actually probably half a meter to a meter off there anyway. I think on this side here, it would be easier. This side here could be more challenging because we've lose that bit to the curve. But it'd be worth exploring. In this current market where housing affordability is the driving factor, and in a suburb like this where, let me blow your mind, this one here that I did, I sold that block of land, I think, for $230,000 in 2018. That property with a 4-bed, 2-bath house on it just sold for over $1 million. Yeah. So if that sold for over $1 million, if you can create even a 180 square meter block here, that's got value. Now, I haven't priced that up yet, but it's probably still worth 350, 400 at least, because you can build something on it. So that means someone can get into this area with a brand new property for under $1 million, which, how else are they going to do that? Even the townhouses are selling for more than that. And that's the thing there, is if you can see value. And that was what got me across the line in doing this one here. I was very nervous about doing this one here because it was the first to be done in the area. No one had done anything like that, selling something that small. But they were doing these townhouses here. And I knew that what I was going to sell these for meant someone could build a freehold property for the same, if not less, than they could buy one of these brand new townhouses. So there was obvious value there. Rachel, I've heard some councils allow you to use the meter square loss to the truncation on the corner. Is that a thing of the past, or does it still happen in some councils? Look, I actually couldn't, I'll probably best not to comment too much on that. Mostly because, actually, interestingly, mostly the ones where I've done it, I've been the one having to give up the truncation. And yes, when we've done it, then they've allowed us to include that. I don't know if that works now when it's already had the truncation done. That's something I haven't tested. Okay, so let's look at another edge on this, because interestingly, now here's another thing I want to point out here. This property, when I went out the other day for a drive, I had my acquisitions guy in the office, and we're looking for something very specific at the moment. And he was saying, oh, look, nothing new's come up. And I just happened to have to go out here for an appointment. And I went, you know what? I haven't been for a drive around here for a while. I'm going to go for a drive. And I found 3 properties that were of interest to me that were not online. 3. Now, that's in one very small area. So one of them was never going on the market. And the other 2, I'm actually not entirely sure whether they weren't online yet, but or potentially they sold off market and I just haven't heard yet. There is that possibility. But the point being is you cannot do this game sitting behind your computer staring at realestate.com. You need to be out there. You need to have your finger on the pulse and know what is happening when it happens, not catching up later on when the rest of the world does on realestate.com. So interestingly, when I went out there, this one also was for sale. So there's a possibility that if both of these could be bought, could something better be done? Now, question to you all. Do you think getting a neighboring property will always improve a development site? So question is, do you think buying a neighboring property will always improve the development site? Pardon me. Gary, yes? Okay, so the answer is it depends. Pardon me, it depends. Because if getting the neighboring property doesn't allow you to get an additional lot or 2, then the answer is probably no. And sometimes that is the case. It just depends on the zoning. So, oh, sorry, Rachel. Oh, I thought so, but is it just going to make competition for yourself? Not necessarily. No, because you may still have issues with water flow, sewer. Yeah, we haven't got to that yet. Valid point. However, getting the neighbour could actually be the solution to that. So a site that I'm working on in Donnybrook at the moment, the neighbouring site did actually have to be acquired to get legal point of discharge because the neighbours knew that they were the only access. And so they declined to have the pipe going through because they were about to sell the property. And so their thing was, hey, we're selling, we're not letting you have the easement, but if you want to buy it, you can buy it. And you're going to have to pay us a good price for it. And so the guy that I'm helping out there, he'd actually bought it before I got involved, but that's exactly what happens. They kind of held him to ransom. Important to be doing these things before you buy the property. So yeah, it's not always the case. You do need to look at the whole situation. I'll give you an example. If you are in an area where it's your typical 810 square meter block, 20 meters wide, 40 meters deep, and you can subdivide that into 2 lots. Well, if the neighboring one comes up next door, you're not getting an extra lot. Nothing much is changing. You might get a slight bit of economies of scale in your construction, but nothing really of note. But when it's a situation where you can take, like I wrote in the email, 1 + 1 and get 6, or in this case here, maybe it's a 1 to 3, or maybe on this one here, it's only 2 possible on its own. And maybe it's only 2 possible on its own here. But when you combine the 2, you can get 6 as an example. Now that is then when it gets interesting. So let's have a look at this. So let's have a look at the neighboring property on its own first. What are the options there? All right, so it's 32 meters deep and 20 meters wide. Okay, so straight off the bat in this zoning, that property can be subdivided straight down the middle. It's going to mean demolishing that house. And as you guys know, rule of thumb for demolishing a house is you need to be able to get at least 2 more lots, unless the house is derelict. You normally need to be able to get at least 2 more lots because you're demolishing the house to make it worth demolishing the house. So in this case here, the house needs work, but it's not derelict. So demolishing the house it's not going to be economical. Now, okay, let's have a look at some other options. If we did get both, we'd have all of this space down the middle here. Interesting. Okay. So it might be a case of keep both houses and create a block down the middle, which would be about 7.5 meters wide, something like that. Now, I can tell you from experience, don't get too excited about that option. Economically, that won't work because your cost base is way too big. because you're buying 2 houses just to create one new allotment. So the part of the land that you are able to, use your expertise to unlock is too small. So without even doing a feasibility, I can tell you that doesn't work. The development will work. The numbers won't work. The ROI will be too low. What about if we could get a rear access driveway down the back here? Could something be possible there? What do you think? Before I give my 2 cents worth, could that work, doing a rear access driveway down here? Thoughts? Or if you see something else, feel free to throw it in here as a suggestion and we'll have a look at it. And while you're doing that, I'm just going to measure the other side and just see if there's space here. No. So in this council here, they typically want 5 meters for a rear access. So that particular option there on that side wouldn't work. We definitely have 5 meters on this side. Okay, well, maybe a rear lot could work. Maybe. And the reason I say maybe is if we have a look at the size of what this block would be at the back. All right, let's say it goes to there. Yeah, roughly 190 square meters. Now, you might actually be able to achieve that in this one because we've got all this space here. But the challenge that I've never been able to solve on something like that in the past is while the scheme doesn't stop you from doing a real lot of that size in this zoning, you need to be able to demonstrate drive in, drive out. And what I mean drive in, drive out, you've got to be able to do it driving in forward and driving out forward. So you've got to be able to turn around at the back. So if you just have your normal access way down the back here to this small house and you drive and your garage is right here, there's no turning around. And even though it is your private driveway, you actually still need to be able to turn around and drive out forwards. Now, because we've got this additional space here next to the house, maybe something's possible, but it's still not very exciting because we'd probably then need to steal land from here or here. I'm not in love with it. It's not that interesting. I would say possibly, okay, so we look, maybe a block there, maybe a block here. I think, yeah, I can't really see another way that we'd squeeze another one out. The only other thing there would be then if you demolished this house here, and then because you've got 20.16 meters wide there, ideally you want your blocks a minimum of 7.5 meters wide as a standard terrace lot. So we'd need about 1.5 meters more frontage to be able to do 3 terrace lots here. So what that would look like would be demolishing this house and going terrace lot, terrace lot, terrace lot. But then we're stealing another 1.5 meters off the back of these 2 here. So this is one of those ones where there very well could be something here. But oh my goodness, are we pushing the boundaries on everything? But that's not a problem. That's not something to walk away from. That's exciting. That's cool. Because if you can solve that, that's a touch of magic. With this one, I'd be to figure that out. That is something that I would sit down. I would probably get it surveyed, and then I would get my drafty to then we'd start playing with different configurations here. Because the real magic would be if you could figure out a way to keep both houses and create another 3 or 4 lots. If you could figure out that, that's the magic. Now, these 2 lots here, that one I think is pretty simple. This one here, if access would be given here, yep, pretty simple. Question mark is how far away we need to come from the house to get rid of that fire rating concern, which I think from memory is 1 meter. No, actually, no, it might be more than that. And then we've got a question of are these blocks still functional because they'd only be like 180, 170 square meters. Now, I know blocks like that have been done and smaller, so the answer is probably yes. But then there's the question of, if we stole 1.5 meters off here to create another lot here, there's a lot of possibilities there. All right, just given the time, we go, all right, we're half an hour in. Let's have a look at some services because that could be another thing. All right, so what do we see, guys? Obviously, we're looking at water and sewer. What opportunities do you see? What challenges do you see? Trunk main. Yeah, that's there. But what else is there? Standard mains in the right place, though. Yeah, for that corner lot, no issue. Plug and play. For the one around the corner, it's an interesting one, actually. It's a shame. I was just thinking, would have been good to actually see the dial before you dig for our previous one there, because I can't remember how the water worked there. In that, I'm pretty sure we had to do meters off the side here. Yeah, that'd be an interesting one. So it would depend on the situation of the trunk main here, which we don't have the level of detail for. So that would be a question for the engineer: is would they actually allow us to create an additional connection to that trunk main? Because they typically don't allow duplication of services, in that, in theory, you could run an extension of this water down here, but that would be a duplication of services. So unlikely that they would support that. Okay, Rachel, we've got good sewer. So good sewer would need to run down the boundary. What slope? Manhole close by. Easement for water for rear lot if you were able to do that. Okay, cool. Love the suggestions. So, yep, look, I've got to say, off first view, sewer looks pretty good. Why? Because both blocks actually have their own sewer. So if we can extend, like if we were to cut this one in 3, if we can extend that across the back here, great. Now, here's the thing with that though, 3 meter easement, depending on the depth of it, could be more, but unlikely. 3 meter easement across the back there on already very small blocks. Yikes. I mean, we're squeezing this in like sardines. So possibly, yep, sewer across the back, question mark on what it does for the functionality of the property. No issue for number 28. That's easy. And water, yeah, look, potentially an easement through the back there from that. I haven't seen that done unless it was a rear access driveway. I don't think that would be allowed, but interestingly, never tried that before. So interesting suggestion. But yeah, so sewer is solvable. Good point from Roland on the depth, and very relevant here. And that was actually one of the issues we had with our site 2 blocks away, was the sewer was already, there was a manhole in the neighbour's property which we needed to access, and that sewer was already so high that to achieve the appropriate amount of fall across the distance that we did, the size of pipe we needed was huge because it was so flat, and trying to achieve the right amount of fall on it was really difficult. So the cost of that sewer ended up blowing out because of, like, the size of pipe was huge because it had to be so flat. So not that necessarily means that this sewer is shallow, as in it's not very deep below the ground, but 2 blocks away, we already had that issue. Potentially that's a challenge here, but we wouldn't have to run it as far here as we did on the other side. So that's something. So look, sewer appears to be solvable. Water for the 1 into 3 here. Yep. Splitting this one here, questionable. Now, what I would note here though is this whole area is zoned for this high density. So they clearly want development on this road, but if they're not allowing anyone to do additional connections on the trunk main, that would be very difficult. Now, I don't have the ability to do it very quickly, but I know there were some blocks that were split further up here, but it was quite a while ago, so there could be some precedents there that we could look at. But the fastest solution would actually just be to ask the engineer. So water and sewer, let's say probably okay, but definitely some question marks there. No stormwater infrastructure, but in this one, really probably not going to be an issue. The blocks are pretty flat. If we had an issue, it would be that we might need to fill a little bit to get the the slope to the road, but I don't think that's the case. NBN. Now, NBN is interesting because it doesn't show it as actually being in Jacaranda yet. It's across the road. So, yeah, there's a possibility we actually might end up using the Telstra network on this one because it doesn't appear that NBN is there. I will say that to me seems very odd, and I'd question how up-to-date this map is. So, yeah, that's one I'd be questioning with my electrical engineer. I can't say I've had that in the past where it's been outdated, but in a suburb like this, to not have NBN in place would be very odd, very odd. So I've got a question mark on that. Okay, how are we doing for time? 35 minutes. All right, let's have a crack at just this one here as a 1 into 3. We've got enough time for the quick version of that. So we're going to go 3 lots. Lead in time. How long do you reckon it's going to take us to get on site and start construction? So that means DA approval, operational works approval, tendering the work, actually getting people on site. How long should we allow for this? How many months, I should say? It's got to be in months. So how many months will it take us to get on site, do you think? Rachel, 9 months. All right. Look, I'm going to say 10 at least. And the reason I say that is if we're pulling off that situation with the access to Leach's Road South, I can see there being a bit of back and forth thing between the traffic engineering council. Yeah, boom, Rachel, exactly. And look, it could be longer. Those things can drag out. I've just had one in Griffin, and we got the RFI. I don't know the exact timing, but it's a couple of months ago, and we only just got it back to them yesterday, I think it was, or Friday last week. Why did it take so long? Exactly that, back and forth thing on traffic, showing swept paths for refuse trucks and all this sorts of stuff. And incidentally, and get used to this, is in the end, we ended up back on the solution that we proposed at the very, very beginning, which they rejected at the very beginning. So yeah, that's fairly commonplace. All right, so construction and titling. Look, it's not a lot of construction here, so 4 months is plenty. I'm just going to beef that up because we're allowing 18 months for the simple ones. This one, yeah, there's a bit more to it. I'd say allow 20 months. Okay, we've got a 20% contingency on construction. All right, now let's say, no, I actually haven't got a buy price out of these guys yet, but let's say the buy price on this is 1.2. Okay, sewer. All right, definitely not going to be 10 grand. All right, because we, at the very best situation, do need to extend that sewer through there. So I'm going to make an estimate of 20,000. Water there is plug and play. So yeah, 5K per additional connection, plenty. Stormwater, I don't really think there's going to be anything needed there. That's fine. Power and telecoms. So yeah, that's an interesting one, which I'm just going to leave it at the 25 purely because we don't know. It's not showing NBN there, which is really odd. If it was just connecting into Telstra, it's probably bugger all. But yeah, it's just got me suspicious there. So I'm just going to leave that provision of 25,000. That's obviously assuming design and construction. Although actually that's, yeah, no, we'll leave that there. We're working on no house demo, and we're going to work on the scenario that we can move the boundary far enough that we don't need to do fire rating. But we do need to demolish the deck. So, and there will be a make good there. So we'll do that at the bottom. Erosion sediment control, rear access driveway, no. Earthworks, no. Footpath, did we see a footpath there? I can't remember. So no footpath there. However, let's just zoom out. So they've done a footpath on that side, so we're probably fine. And the only reason I looked at that was something that we got hit with there, was extending the footpath there, because that one was already in place. But they haven't made anyone do it here, but there's been no developments there. So look, I don't think so, because normally in that area they only want one on one side. So probably not. Seepage pits, no. Turf, we'll leave a provisional amount. Retaining wall, no, don't believe so. Fire hydrant, I don't expect so because we're just plugging and playing into the existing thing. We're not changing frontages or we're not moving off the frontage, the existing frontage. So if that property is compliant, then ours should be. Fencing. Let's have a look what's in place. No, that would be why. Okay, so an existing timber fence, but it's looking pretty sad. And obviously we'd be getting rid of whatever's at the front here. Actually down the side might be all right. Look, I'll put in a provision for it. We'll say 30 by 20, so we'll put in 50 meters for fencing. So what are we allowing here? 110. Might be getting a little bit lean these days, but we'll leave it in there for now. So we'll go 110 by 50. Okay, now what the cost will be for deleting that deck and making good. It's a bit of a, poke a stick at it. What do you guys reckon? I've got my idea in my head just from previous experience, but let's see what you think. What do you think that'll cost to demolish the deck and make good the side of the house? Because obviously the deck's kind of playing in there with the roof. There's a door that we need to close in or add some stairs to go down that side. And wherever it's connecting to the house, there'll be some general make good required there. So what do you think we should allow for that? In the meantime, I'll delete that because there's no tree clearing, although I think that was right. So what do you reckon? Demolish the deck. Rachel, 10K? I reckon there's probably wishful thinking these days. I would probably start at 20 would be my guess. That's my guess. I could be totally wrong there. Like this is a how long's a piece of string question thing, but I would always prefer to sit on the healthier side in my estimates in the initial FISO because then look, if it looks solid, all right, great, let's go get some quotes. Okay, so we'll leave it at that. And all of this should remain relatively simple. We're creating 2 new lots though, so we need 2 lots of contributions. Everything else here should be fairly standard. Just check electrical engineer. I think probably doubling up there with what we've done at the top. That's getting a bit excessive. Okay, now sales-wise. Now, I'm going to reverse engineer this a little bit. This is just an initial run in that if the other one up the road sold for just over $1 million, I would estimate that house that they have on there these days would probably cost, I would guess about 500,000, maybe more, but let's start with 500,000 to build that. So if that costs 500,000, someone's going to, I should say, so they sold theirs for over $1 million, just over, it was like $1,050,000, but that's an 8-year-old property. So if that sold for $1,050,000, then the exact same property, brand new now, would be at least 100 grand more. So let's work on the assumption that it's 1.2, but this is smaller land, slightly. So it's going to be a smaller house. So let's go with 1.1. Now, if the construction cost is 500, take that off 1.1, brings us back to 600. People aren't doing this stuff for free. They want to make some equity when they go to the effort of building. So if we allow 100 grand of uplift for them going through the trouble, that brings us back to 500. Does that compute in my head? 500,000 for that block of land. I got to be honest, that seems a bit heavy. I do know there were some blocks around the corner there that were on the market for quite a while. That being said, this is going back 6 months ago, or maybe even longer. Yeah, it's still a bit heavy for me. Look, I'm going to go 450. And again, remember, this is don't hang me out to dry. This is just initial numbers. So if we had 2 of those at 450, and I still think that's crazy, but if you were able to offer up any land there at the moment, it would go. That's just where the market is at the moment. Okay, and then there's what is the house worth at the end? Okay, well, if the house is worth, if those blocks of land are worth 450, well, then underneath this property is still at least 400. I think it's a slightly bigger block there. So there's at least $550,000 worth of just land. And then you've obviously got a dwelling on top of it. Now, I know property on a 600 square meter block, which was pretty rubbish, sold for about 890. It's on a bigger block. So if we look at that going, all right, it's got 500,000 worth of land value-ish, and probably a bit more, but and then we've got a lesser house, but on more land, selling for around 900. Okay, so that's kind of giving us our play range there. So look, I would throw a number at it and say 750 would be an initial guess. Obviously, all of this is up for review and revision. Okay, so working on interest rates of 6.5% and an 80% lend on the buy. Okay, let's have a look at what that would look like. Yikes. Basically, cost is even. Now, would I walk away from this at this point? Look, based on the variability of everything that I put in there, probably not. The first thing that I would want to have a look at and look further into is these realizations here. Now, the reason I say that is because at the moment I'm getting surprised everywhere as to what things are worth. And just when I think prices are sort of settled in an area, I hear something giving me evidence to the contrary and suggesting even higher. So as crazy as that seems for me, could that land be worth more? Yeah, possibly. Could that house be worth more? Yeah, definitely. Now, is it ready to buy? No. But like I always say, before you go and spend huge amounts of time on anything, make sure you get it under contract, because there's no point getting it under contract, spending all that time if you haven't even locked in price and terms, because then there's just way too many moving pieces. You haven't got any goalposts. Now, the other thing too is I've made an estimate on the buy price here. All right. Let's have a look. For example, all right, so for argument's sake, if I was able to pick it up at 1.1, and let's say my initial working backwards of numbers was actually accurate. Well, if that was the case, then that house would have to be worth more. Look, it's still not there, but you can see how easily these things shift around. Now, the only reason I'm saying, look, there's still a glimmer of hope is because I just got some blocks repriced myself in a suburb further out. And though the pricing that it looks like I'll get for those blocks makes it that this is, it's still pie in the sky a bit, but it's conceivable, as crazy as that may seem. So it's something I would want to have a chat with some of my land agents about, because they are the guys that have their finger on the pulse of exactly what is getting under contract at the moment to see where things are at. So look, there is potential merit in that property, potential. But really at 1.1, it's not exciting. If you were able to pick it up at a mil, all right, then it starts to get exciting. Where is that at a mil? Yeah, at a mil, it's 26% if those sales numbers are correct. So definitely some work to do on that, but I hope you got something out of that, in that seeing this, how we play around with these boundaries, because while that might all seem relatively simple, when I did that up here, that was like pioneering stuff for this area. And you may look at that and go, oh, that's easy. Like, why wouldn't everyone do that? Or, well, that's easy once you see it done. And even knowing that that's what I wanted to do, there was a lot of pushing and shoving. When you've got that small amount of space to play with, just shifting one thing has a big impact on other things and flow-on effects. So, the access for that corner lot is a good example of it. Just shifting one thing here, one thing there, it has big flow-on effects. So there's actually a lot of things at play in a development like that to get council across the line to show that it can be a functioning development. But if you can get good at those things, And keep your mind open to always asking the question, what if, or how could, as opposed to can I? Delete can I? How can we, or what if? Those are better questions. Okay. I know we did a very quick crash course on the FISA there today, but that wasn't meant to be the focus. So have you got any other questions about this one? If you don't have any other questions, what have the biggest learnings been out of this today? You can see Rachel's a bit surprised about my estimate of cost there. Yeah, look, to me it seems crazy as well, but I just know these days, as soon as you get a trade on site, the bill is just eye-watering. So it's I'd rather work on the high side from the beginning and be pleasantly surprised on the low side. And again, if you're working on a project with a cost base of over $1 million and 10 grand is going to swing it, the deal wasn't going to make it anyway. So final questions and key takeaways, guys. What are the key takeaways from today? Or even just things that you found interesting. And some really good questions today, actually. Good interaction. And I can tell in your questions and your comments that your level of sophistication in looking at these sites is going up, which is great. Rachel, if bigger lots sell for more, would it be worth looking at just one side cut off? Gary, capitalize on previous success. Yeah, absolutely. So we'll come back to that in a second. So Rachel, bigger blocks sell for more, yes. Smaller blocks sell for a higher dollar per square meter rate. So I'll say that again. A bigger block will sell for more, but smaller blocks sell for a higher dollar per square meter rate. So when you have a finite number of square meters to sell, ideally you want to get the highest dollar per square meter rate that you can. Just as an example, if you knocked over this house and it's a 600 square meter block of land, I don't know what that currently would be worth. Let's say it's worth 800,000. Now, if it's a 600 square meter block of land, it's worth 800,000. Let's do the math on that. 800,000 divided by 600 square meters. That's $1,333 per square meter. Now, if we sell them as two 300s, but a 300 square meter block of land is worth 500,000. Well, now we've got $1 million divided by 600 square meters that we're selling. We're now selling for $1,600 per square meter. You can see the rhythm. The smaller the lot, it's an exponential growth on dollar per square meter rate. Obviously, you've got cost to create those, but I can tell you as a general rule of thumb, the more lots you get out of it, the better you're going to do. Now, there are other things to take into consideration, which on Gary's point and this, I'm just going to zoom out for a second. So now Gary said capitalize on previous success. And I always tell you, you need to have your finger on the pulse in every market, and that's where you get the opportunities. Well, this is a good example of it. My first project that I picked up here was this one here. And then I forget the exact dates, but all at the same time, I had this development happening here. And then I picked up this development here, 5 lots there. And then I picked up another one over here as well. So all within this little pocket here, I had 3 developments going at the same time. Why? Because one, I was on the ground in the area. My finger could not have been more on the pulse. I was the pulse. So when things popped up, I knew exactly where they sat, exactly what the opportunity was there, exactly what I had to pay for it. And that you'll find that too once you start doing projects, if you're not already doing projects. So yeah, once you get established in an area, you find more opportunities there because of how active you are there. And most importantly, you're out and about, driving around, walking the streets, not on a screen. This one here is an example where we did 5 lots. We could have done 7 easily, maybe more. The reason I didn't do that was because at the same time, Ausbuild was coming out with all of these things over here. So all of this was getting developed at the same time by Ausbuild. And I don't know if you know Ausbuild, but they're a much larger company than me. And did I want to be competing with the exact same stock with a much larger company? No. So I decided that I would go slightly larger blocks so that I wasn't competing with them. But this was also a situation where I'd bought so well that I had the ability to do that. Sometimes you won't have the ability to do that because your feasibility won't allow you to go less blocks and bigger blocks because the numbers just don't work. In this case, the numbers were still fantastic at a 5-lot subdivision. I forget what ROI we achieved on that one, but it was well in excess of 30% from memory. But that's the opportunity that opens up to you when you buy well. If you buy well, life gets really easy. But capitalize on previous success. Absolutely. Take what you learn, see how you can apply it somewhere else as well. I would never was that all the different ways to break up a block? Yeah, it's especially corner blocks, guys. Corner blocks are magic because I'll give you this one here as well. Being a corner, see that duplex? We didn't build it as a duplex, but I was able to sell it as a premium because I could market it as a duplex block, in part because it had that big frontage of being on a corner. So I sold that for a premium. Then also the fact that this was a previously developed street, all this up here, and mine was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, these properties, all the services were just perfectly in the footpath there. So it's a 5-lot subdivision and all just plug and play. Everything was exactly where it needed to be. So corner lots are often very efficient. Rachel, and would you ever consider negotiating with the neighbor to buy a backyard? Absolutely. Absolutely. There's nothing really that I would not consider doing. And that's the thing is, if you ever find yourself in the situation where you think, oh, if only we could, oh, no, they're never going to say yes to that. You don't know. Look, you're probably right, but who cares? Ask the question. Because you hear those stories where people do say yes, and then people wonder, oh my God, they were so lucky. How did they do that? Well, I'll tell you how they did it. They probably always ask the question that others are afraid to ask. And so every now and then the answer is yes. And if that every now and then the answer being yes is equal to $300,000 to $500,000 of profit, it's probably worth asking the question and hoping you get a yes every now and then. So yes, it's definitely worth asking the question to buy 0.5 meter, buy 30 centimeters, buy whatever to be able to meet the minimum requirements. Sometimes it might be things like, if we just take an example here. Now, this is completely fictitious, but you'll get the point. Let's say to split this block here, you had enough area, but you didn't have enough frontage. Well, there's a solve for that. If this guy here doesn't, and you needed 1 more meter, well, buy that corner off that neighbor, you tick the box. If the box that needs to be ticked is I need 1 more meter of frontage, it doesn't specify that the block needs to be that wide the whole way through. It'll be that, the block size needs to be minimum block size and it needs to be minimum frontage. All right, well, there you go. If you already have the size and you can buy that 1 meter off your neighbor, there's your frontage. So, just have I ever done that exact thing? No. Could it be shot down in some other way? Possibly. But don't be so worried about getting the answer right all the time and being told no. Just be willing to go, let's give it a go. And that one there, I can say with pretty high level of confidence, as long as you can meet the building envelope requirements, you actually could get away with that. How do you value that though? As in that 1 meter? Don't get caught up on that, Rachel. It could be $50. It could be $1,000. The question is, number one, is the neighbor willing to do it? Are they open to it? And then it's a conversation. And ultimately, if the question is, if you can't get that, there's no deal. But if you can get that, then you've got a deal that's going to make you $300,000, $400,000. Well, you know what? If the neighbor wants 10 grand for that 1 meter, give him 10 grand for the 1 meter. If he wants 20 grand for the 1 meter, give him 20 grand for the 1 meter. But what you will often find is obviously, if you're just looking at this site fresh, you won't have a relationship. But if you start building the relationships before you ever need the relationship, when it comes to you asking for something, you'll often find that it is much more cheap. It's much cheaper than you might have expected. This is where the sewer was in this manhole in the back of this townhouse that I needed for this property here. Now that's pretty invasive for such a small property to allow access to this sewer here. And she had a really nice garden along there. So if I had not have started building the relationship early and building that trust early, there's no way she would have said yes to me. I'm sure of that, because it took a lot of trust to allow me to take that fence out, pull up her garden, do the work there. And then part of the deal was that I would reinstate it all perfectly. And I think I did some new edging. I can't remember. I also bought her wine and chocolates and bits and pieces, and nurture the relationships. Just nurture them. Rachel, sorry, if you bought the 400 square meter backyard from the neighbour, if you bought the 400 square meter bucket, I'm not entirely sure what you mean there. I'm guessing you mean back here. Are you saying buying this section here off this neighbour? Is that what you're referring to? I guess the short answer is if it makes a deal, yeah, I'd always consider it and I'd always ask. But I'm not sure that's exactly what you're asking for. But answer is, if it's possible and it's workable, then yes, I would have the conversation. The comment was regarding the rear lot, not just extending the frontage. Yeah, still not following. That's the only rear lot we've talked about there, so I'm not sure if you meant that. But look, we do need to wind it up, but I will say the answer is yes. If a deal could be done, it's worth asking the question. You never know what the answer is to a question unless you ask it. So thank you, guys. I've failed again at keeping this at 30 to 45 minutes, but I hope it was worthwhile. Thanks for joining me. Thanks for the questions. Some really good questions and observations there today. Good work. Well done. And I will see you next week. I can't recall if next week is the masterclass or if it's Deals Live. But either way, I will see you next week. Thanks, guys.